During my husband's seventh-day memorial mass, my son whispered to his wife, "Now she'll leave, and the house is ours." I just held the envelope with a secret inside. "I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from, so I can see how far my story has reached." The church was quiet, except for the somber hymn playing softly in the background. I sat in the front pew, my hands clutching a lace handkerchief that Paul had given me on our 40th wedding anniversary. My eyes weren't focused on Father Matthews or the portrait of my husband that stood next to his urn. Instead, I stared blankly ahead, still unable to process that Paul was gone. 50 years together. 50 years of morning coffees, shared dreams, and weathering life's storms side by side. And now, at 72, I was alone. The church was fuller than I expected. Paul had been beloved in our community, the kind man who'd help neighbors fix their fences, who remembered everyone's birthdays, who coached Little League long after our son had grown too old for it. I felt a small comfort knowing how many lives he'd touched. I didn't notice my son Adam moving from his seat until he slid in next to Grace, his wife of 15 years. She was wearing an expensive black dress that seemed too fashionable for a memorial service. Adam leaned in close to her ear, and in the quiet of the church, his whisper carried to where I sat. "Now she'll go, and the house is ours." My body went cold. I turned slightly, just enough to see Grace's lips curl into a smile as she nodded. My fingers instinctively tightened around the envelope in my purse. The envelope Paul had given me 3 days before he passed. "Keep this safe, Amelia," he had said, his voice weak but his eyes clear. "Don't open it until after the memorial. Promise me." I'd promised, not understanding then why it mattered so much to him. Now, hearing my own son's words, I began to understand. Father Matthews was saying something about Paul's generous spirit, but I couldn't focus on his words. Instead, memories flooded my mind, of Paul and me at 27, scraping together every penny for the down payment on our little Victorian house on Maple Street. How we'd painted each room ourselves, replaced the plumbing, fixed the roof, during that terrible storm our first winter there. Paul had built the wraparound porch with his own hands while I was pregnant with Adam. He'd said he wanted a place where I could rock our baby and watch the sunset. Later, he added a swing set. In the backyard, then a treehouse. Every nook of that house held a memory, a lifetime we'd built together, and my son was waiting for me to go so he could claim it all. I felt dizzy, my chest tightening. How long had they been planning this? Had they been waiting for Paul to die? Had they been counting down the days until I would be out of their way too? I thought of how Adam and Grace had been visiting more frequently in the months since Paul's diagnosis, how they'd been so helpful, offering to organize Paul's medications, suggesting they could take some of the house maintenance off our hands. I had been grateful then. Now, their attention seemed predatory. The memorial service continued around me, but I was lost in my own thoughts. I remembered the strange conversation I'd overheard between Adam and Grace a month ago, when they thought I was napping. Something about outdated decor and wasted space, and what it could sell for after renovations. I'd dismissed it then. Who talks about renovations when someone is dying? But now, their words had a different meaning. The envelope in my purse felt heavy, like it contained more than just paper. Paul had always been perceptive. Had he noticed what I'd been too trusting to see? As the service ended and people began to approach me with condolences, I felt Adam's hand on my shoulder. His touch, once comforting, now made my skin crawl. "Mom," he said, his voice soft and controlled. "Why don't I drive you home? You shouldn't be alone tonight." Behind his concerned expression, I now saw calculation. He wanted to be in the house. He wanted to start staking his claim. "Actually," I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice sounded, "Dorothy is taking me home. We have some things to discuss." Dorothy, my oldest friend, looked surprised, but quickly nodded in agreement. Adam's smile faltered for just a moment. "But Mom, I've already arranged everything. Grace has made dinner." "Another time," I said firmly, clutching my purse closer. "Dorothy and I have plans." As Dorothy led me out of the church, I felt Adam's eyes burning into my back. I'd never stood up to my son before. Paul had always said I indulged him too much, made excuses for his self-centered behavior. But Paul wasn't here anymore to shield me from the truth, and the truth was in the envelope I was now holding onto like a lifeline. "What was that about?" Dorothy whispered as we walked to her car. I took a deep breath, the weight of what I'd overheard still crushing my chest. "I need to stop at the bank before we go home," I said instead of answering her question. "There's something I need to check." My whole world had just shifted beneath my feet, but one thing was certain. I wasn't going anywhere, not without a fight. Dorothy's car pulled into my driveway, and for a moment, I couldn't bring myself to get out. The white Victorian house that had been my home for nearly 5 decades now felt like unfamiliar territory. What else had I missed? What other betrayals had I been blind to? "You want me to come in with you?" Dorothy asked, her wrinkled face lined with concern. I shook my head. "No, I need to do this alone." The bank safety deposit box had contained exactly what I expected. The envelope Paul had mentioned, sealed and waiting. I hadn't opened it yet. Some part of me was afraid of what I might find. "Call me if you need anything," Dorothy insisted. "I mean it, Amelia. Any time." I squeezed her, hand in gratitude, and made my way up the familiar path to my front door. The porch swing creaked in the evening breeze, the same swing where Paul and I had spent countless summer evenings watching the neighborhood change around us. The moment I turned my key in the lock, I knew someone was inside. Lights were on that I hadn't left on, and the faint smell of an unfamiliar perfume hung in the air. My stomach tightened. "Hello?" I called out, though I already knew who it was. Grace appeared from the kitchen, an apron tied around her waist as if she belonged there. "Amelia, we were worried when you didn't come home with Adam." Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "It never had? We?" I asked, hanging my coat on the rack Paul had built when we first moved in. "Adam's upstairs," Grace said, wiping her hands on the apron. "My apron. He's clearing some space in the closets." Clearing space? My blood ran cold. They were already moving in, already claiming territory while Paul's ashes weren't even cold. "I didn't give him permission to do that," I said, my voice stronger than I expected. Grace's smile faltered. "We just thought we'd help organize things. It must be so overwhelming for you." Before I could respond, Adam came downstairs carrying a box of what looked like Paul's old sweaters. My heart clenched at the sight of the green cardigan on top. The one I'd given Paul for our last Christmas together. "Mom, you're home." Adam set the box down. "We were just getting some things ready for donation. No sense in keeping all this stuff gathering dust." "Those aren't for donation," I said firmly. "Put them back where you found them." Adam and Grace exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. "Mom," Adam said slowly, as if speaking to a child, "we're just trying to help. This house is too big for you now. All these things. They're just reminders that will make you sad." "This is my house," I reminded him. "Those are my decisions to make." Another look between them. "Of course it is," Grace interjected smoothly. "We just think it might be time to consider something. Smaller. More manageable. There's that lovely retirement community near us." "I'm not moving," I said, cutting her off. "And I'm tired. It's been a long day." The hint was clear, but neither of them moved toward the door. "Mom," Adam tried again. "Be reasonable. This house needs work that you can't manage. The property taxes alone." "I've managed for 50 years," I interrupted. "I'll continue to manage." When they finally left, After more thinly veiled suggestions about selling the house, I locked the door and leaned against it, exhausted. The envelope in my purse seemed to burn through the leather. In the quiet of my living room, our living room, I finally opened it. Inside were several documents, neatly organized with post-it notes in Paul's handwriting. The first was the deed to the house, transferred solely to my name. The second was a bank statement for an account I didn't know existed, with a balance large enough to maintain the house for years. The third was a handwritten letter. My dearest Amelia, if you're reading this, I'm gone, and I'm sorry for that. More sorry than I can say. But I'm not sorry for what I'm about to tell you. I've suspected for some time that Adam and Grace have been waiting to claim our home. I overheard them discussing their plans months ago, how they would convince you to move into assisted living, how they would renovate and possibly sell our home for a profit. I confronted Adam about it. He denied everything, of course, but I saw the truth in his eyes. Our son has changed, Amelia. Or perhaps he was always this way, and I never wanted to admit it. I've made arrangements to protect you. The house is now solely in your name. I've also set aside money in a separate account that Adam doesn't know about. The details are in these documents. I know you'll be hurt by this revelation. I debated whether to tell you at all. But you deserve to know the truth, and you deserve to be protected. Fight for our home, Amelia. It's not just wood and plaster. It's our life together. Every scratch on the banister, every worn floorboard, every rose in the garden tells our story. And remember, you are stronger than you think. All my love, forever and always, Paul. Tears streamed down my face as I read his words. Even from beyond, Paul was protecting me. He'd seen what I had been unwilling to see, the growing entitlement in our son, the calculating gleam in Grace's eye when she looked around our home. I folded the letter carefully and held it to my chest. The house seemed to settle around me, familiar and safe, despite the earlier invasion. In the silence, I could almost hear Paul's voice. Stand your ground, Amelia. And I would. Tomorrow, Adam and Grace would discover that their plans weren't going to unfold as easily as they had imagined. Tomorrow, they would learn that the quiet, accommodating mother they thought they knew had disappeared along with their father. But tonight, I allowed myself to grieve, not just for Paul, but for the son I thought I had raised and the family I thought we were. The morning after the memorial service, I woke to the sound of a car door slamming in my driveway. I glanced at the clock, 7:30 a.m., too early for casual visitors. From my bedroom window, I watched Adam and Grace emerge from their shiny SUV, their determined strides telling me everything I needed to know about this unannounced visit. I quickly dressed, tucking Paul's letter into my pocket. By the time I made it downstairs, they were already letting themselves in with the spare key I'd forgotten they had. "Mom?" Adam called out, his voice overly cheerful. "We brought breakfast." I entered the kitchen to find Grace unpacking bakery, containers on my counter acting as if she owned the place. When she saw me, her smile appeared, polished and practiced. "Amelia, we thought you could use some company. And look, we brought those almond croissants you like." "I don't like almond croissants," I said quietly. Paul did. An awkward silence fell. It was such a small thing, but it told a larger story. They didn't even know what I liked for breakfast. "Well," Adam recovered quickly, "we have plain ones too. Sit down, Mom. We need to talk about some practical matters." I poured myself coffee in the mug Paul had given me for our 45th anniversary, the one with our wedding photo printed on it, and sat down. "What practical matters?" Grace and Adam exchanged one of their looks. "We've been thinking," Adam began, his tone gentle but rehearsed, "that this house is really too much for you now. The stairs, the yard work, all the maintenance." "I'm managing fine," I replied, sipping my coffee. "For now, maybe," Grace interjected. But we've been looking into some wonderful assisted living communities. There's one just 20 minutes from our house. It has wonderful amenities. I'm not moving to assisted living. Mom, Adam's voice hardened slightly. Be reasonable. Dad's gone. You can't maintain this place by yourself. I hired Mr. Peterson from down the street to help with the yard. And for your information, I've been handling the bills and household repairs for years. Your father's hands were too arthritic near the end. This seemed to surprise them. The capable mother didn't fit their narrative of the helpless widow. Still, Grace persisted, wouldn't you be happier somewhere smaller? Without all these reminders? I looked around the kitchen Paul and I had renovated together 10 years ago. The butcher block countertops he'd sanded and sealed by hand. The tile backsplash we'd spent a whole weekend installing, laughing as we got grout all over ourselves. These reminders are why I'm staying. Adam's facade of patience cracked. Mom, let's be practical. The will reading is next week. Dad left the house to both of us, which means we need to make decisions together. The confidence in his voice told me everything. He truly believed the house would be at least partially his. He had no idea what Paul had done. We're thinking of selling, Grace said, her eyes gleaming with barely concealed excitement. Property values in this neighborhood have skyrocketed. We could get at least double what you and Dad paid. You've already talked to a realtor, I stated, not asking. Adam had the decency to look slightly embarrassed. Just preliminarily, we wanted to have all the information. I set my mug down carefully. I noticed some of Paul's things are missing. His collection of vintage fishing lures. The antique compass his father gave him. Adam shifted uncomfortably. I took a few keepsakes. Dad would have wanted me to have them. Without asking me. Mom, you're being difficult. His tone was that of a parent scolding a child. I know you're grieving, but we need to be practical. This house is worth a lot of money. Money you could use for your care. Money that should stay in the family. I felt a surge of anger that surprised me with its intensity. For decades, I'd been the peacekeeper, the one who smoothed things over, who made excuses for Adam's self-centeredness. Paul had been the one to set boundaries. Without him, I'd feared I wouldn't have the strength. But sitting there, watching, my son and his wife planning to dismantle my life, I found a resolve I didn't know I possessed. I think you should leave now, I said. Mom, take your croissants with you and leave your key on the counter. Grace's artificial smile disappeared. Amelia, we're just trying to help. No, I said, standing up. You're trying to take advantage of me while I'm grieving. You're trying to push me out of my own home, and you're stealing from me when you think I won't notice. That's ridiculous. Adam's face flushed with anger. Everything in this house belongs to both of us now. Dad would have... Your father, I cut him off, knew exactly what you were planning. He overheard you both discussing how you'd get me out of the house after he was gone. The look of shock on their faces would have been satisfying if it wasn't so painful to see the truth confirmed. I want you to leave, I repeated. Now. You can't just kick us out, Grace protested. This house is half Adam's now. We have rights. We'll see about that at the will reading, I said calmly, though my heart was racing. Until then, I don't want either of you in my home. I'll be changing the locks today. Adam stood up, looming over me. For a moment, I saw a flash of something ugly in his eyes, something that made me step back. But then he controlled himself, forcing a tight smile. Fine, we'll go. But this conversation isn't over, Mom. You're clearly not thinking clearly right now. We'll talk after the will reading, when you've had time to process everything. I watched them leave, Grace forgetting her carefully curated politeness as she slammed the door behind them. Through the window, I saw them arguing in the driveway, Adam gesturing angrily toward the house. Only when their car disappeared down the street did I allow my hands to shake, the adrenaline leaving me in a rush. I leaned against the counter, suddenly exhausted. I did it, Paul, I whispered to the empty kitchen. I stood my ground. But this was just the beginning. The real battle would come at the will reading, when Adam discovered that his plans had been thwarted before they began. True to my word, I had the locks changed that afternoon. The locksmith, a young man with kind eyes, didn't ask questions, but I explained anyway. My husband recently passed. It's time for new locks. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. I did the same for my grandmother after my grandfather died. Peace of mind matters. Peace of mind. I hadn't had much of that since overhearing Adam's words in church. But with each small action, changing the locks, calling Paul's lawyer to confirm the will reading, checking the secure account Paul had set up, I felt a tiny piece of myself returning. I spent the next few days going through Paul's things at my own pace. Each item held memories: his collection of paperweights from places we'd visited together, his worn leather workshop apron, the half-finished birdhouse in his shop. These weren't just things to be donated or sold. They were pieces of our life, together. I was in the garden, tending to Paul's prized roses, when Dorothy stopped by 3 days after the memorial. "You look better," she said, settling into the garden chair beside me. Still sad, but more present. I trimmed a withered leaf from a rose bush. "I had a confrontation with Adam and Grace," Dorothy snorted. "About time. I never said anything because Paul asked me not to, but those two have been circling this house like vultures since his diagnosis." "You knew?" I paused, secateurs in hand. "Suspected. Paul noticed it before you did. He asked me to keep an eye on you, make sure they didn't pressure you into anything after he was gone." A lump formed in my throat. Even in his final months, Paul had been protecting me. "They want me in assisted living," I said. "They've already talked to realtors about the house." Dorothy's eyes narrowed. "And what do you want, Amelia?" It was such a simple question, but no one had asked me that in a long time. What did I want? "I want to stay in my home," I said finally. "I want to live with my memories. I want to tend Paul's roses and sit on the porch swing and sleep in the bedroom we shared for 50 years. Is that too much to ask?" "No," Dorothy said firmly. "It's not. Too much at all." That evening, I did something I'd been putting off. I called my daughter Sarah in Arizona. Unlike Adam, Sarah had never shown interest in the house or Paul's assets. She'd built her own life, her own success, calling regularly but visiting rarely. "Mom," her voice was warm through the phone. "How are you holding up?" "I've been better," I admitted. "Sarah, there's something I need to tell you about Adam and the house." I explained everything: the overheard conversation, Paul's letter, the confrontation in the kitchen. Sarah listened without interrupting, and when I finished, she sighed deeply. "I wish I could say I'm surprised," she said. "Adam's always wanted what comes easiest." "You knew too." I felt a flicker of hurt that everyone had seen what I'd been blind to. "Mom, Adam's been talking about when the house is his for years. I thought you and Dad had promised it to him or something." "We never did." My voice cracked slightly. "This was always going to be our home until we were both gone. Then, yes, I assumed both of you would inherit it equally. But Dad changed." "Things," Sarah said, understanding immediately. "Good for him. The will reading is next week. Adam's going to be furious." "Do you want me to come?" Sarah offered. "I can get a flight out." Part of me wanted to say yes, to have her support, but another part, a stronger part, knew this was something I needed to face on my own. "No, sweetheart. You stay with your family. I'll call you after." After hanging up, I sat on the porch swing, watching twilight deepen over the neighborhood. The streetlights flickered on, one by one. Mrs. Henderson from across the street waved as she walked her little terrier. 2 children rode their bikes down the sidewalk, laughing. This was my world, my community. I belonged here. I became aware of a car idling at the curb. Adam's SUV. He didn't get out, just sat there watching the house. Watching me. After several minutes, he drove away. The intimidation tactic might have worked a week ago. Now, it only strengthened my resolve. The next morning, I called Paul's lawyer, Mr. Steinman. "Mrs. Warner," his voice was formal but kind. "I was just about to call you. The will reading is set for Monday at 10 a.m. "I know what's in it," I told him. Paul showed me the changes he made. "Ah." A pause. "And your son?" "Doesn't know, and I'd like to keep it that way until the reading." "Of course." He hesitated. "Mrs. Warner, your son called me yesterday. He was inquiring about the estate, specifically about the house." "What did you tell him?" "Nothing, of course. Client confidentiality. But he seemed quite certain that the house would be jointly inherited." I clutched the phone tighter. "He's in for a surprise." "Yes," Mr. Steinman agreed. "He is. Mrs. Warner, Amelia, if you're concerned about any difficult reactions, we can arrange to have security present." The fact that he was suggesting this told me everything about how he expected Adam to react. "No," I said after a moment's consideration. "No security. This is family business." "As you wish. I'll see you Monday." The weekend stretched before me, and for the first time since Paul's passing, I felt a sense of purpose. I spent Saturday cleaning out Paul's workshop, organizing his tools, running my fingers over the projects he'd never finish. I wasn't erasing him. I was honoring him, making space for him to remain present in a different way. On Sunday, I planted new roses in the garden, a variety called New Beginnings that the nursery owner assured me would bloom beautifully come spring. As I patted the soil around each plant, I felt Paul's presence so strongly it brought tears to my eyes. "I miss you," I whispered. "But I'm standing my ground, just like you asked." That night, I slept better than I had since his death. In the morning, I dressed carefully in a blue dress Paul had always loved, ate a proper breakfast, and drove myself to Mr. Steinman's office. Adam and Grace were already there, dressed as if for a business meeting. Grace's smile was back in place, Adam's expression carefully neutral. They hadn't expected me to arrive alone. "Mom?" Adam greeted me with a kiss on the cheek that felt like a formality. "How are you doing?" "Better," I said truthfully. "Much better." We were shown into a conference room where Mr. Steinman waited with the documents spread neatly before him. "Shall we begin?" he asked, meeting my eyes briefly. I nodded, my heart racing but my resolve firm. The time for hiding was over. Let the truth come out. Mr. Steinman cleared his throat and adjusted his glasses, his experienced eyes taking in the tension around the conference table. "Before we begin," he said, "I want to clarify that I was Paul Warner's personal attorney for over 30 years. The documents I'm about to read reflect his explicit wishes, finalized 3 months before his passing." Adam nodded impatiently. Yes. Can we proceed?" I sat quietly, my hands folded in my lap, watching my son's confident posture. He had no idea what was coming. "Very well." Mr. Steinman opened a leather portfolio. "I'll begin with the main provisions." He read through some preliminary language, Adam fidgeting beside me while Grace maintained her perfect posture, a calculating gleam in her eyes. Then Mr. Steinman reached the critical section. "Regarding the family residence at 1842 Oakwood Lane, I, Paul Warner, leave the property in its entirety to my wife, Amelia Warner, to do with as she sees fit. The deed has already been transferred solely to her name." Adam's head snapped up. "What? That can't be right." Mr. Steinman continued as if he hadn't heard the interruption. "Additionally, I have established a trust fund in the amount of $350,000 for the continued maintenance of said property to be accessed exclusively by Amelia Warner." "Stop," Adam demanded. his face flushing. There must be some mistake. The house was supposed to be split between Mom and me. Mr. Steinman looked at him calmly. There is no mistake, Mr. Warner. Your father was very clear in his instructions. Let me see that. Adam snatched the document from the lawyer's hands, his eyes scanning frantically. Grace leaned in beside him, her perfect mask slipping to reveal shock and displeasure. This is dated 3 months ago, Adam said accusingly. Dad was already sick then. He wasn't thinking clearly. This can't be legally binding. Your father was of completely sound mind, Mr. Steinman replied firmly. I personally verified his mental competence, as did his physician. There are signed statements to that effect. Adam turned to me, betrayal written across his face. Mom, you can't let this stand. Dad always intended for the house to pass to me. Eventually, you know that. I met his gaze steadily. Your father never made any such promise, Adam. But we had plans. We were going to... He stopped abruptly, realizing what he was about to reveal. Going to what? I asked softly. Renovate? Sell for a profit? Move me somewhere more suitable? Adam's expression confirmed everything. Grace put a warning hand on his arm, but he shook it off. This isn't fair, he insisted. I'm his son. I deserve part of that house. Deserving has nothing to do with it, Mr. Steinman interjected. These are your father's legal wishes. There must be something we can do, Grace spoke up, her voice honey-sweet despite the desperation in her eyes. Surely there's some way to contest this. You're welcome to try, Mr. Steinman said, but I strongly advise against it. Mr. Warner's wishes are clearly documented, and he left specific instructions about why he made these changes. He pulled another document from his folder. Adam's face paled. What is that? A letter your father asked me to read if his will was questioned. Mr. Steinman glanced at me. Mrs. Warner, would you prefer we proceed? Part of me wanted to spare Adam the humiliation, to protect him, as I always had. But a stronger part, the part growing more resolute by the day, knew that truth was necessary. Read it, I said. Mr. Steinman nodded and began. If my son is contesting this will, it confirms what I sadly came to realize in my final months, that he values property over people, including his own mother. I overheard Adam and Grace discussing plans to move Amelia to assisted living against her wishes after my death, so they could take possession of our family home. This house represents 50 years of memories and Amelia's security. It belongs to her alone, now and always. The silence in the room was deafening. Adam's face had gone from red to white. You spied on us? He finally managed. Your father wasn't spying, I said quietly. He was sitting on the back porch when you and Grace were in the garden, discussing your plans quite openly. You never noticed him there. Adam stood up so abruptly his chair nearly toppled. This is ridiculous. We were just talking about possibilities, about what might be best for everyone. Dad completely misunderstood. Did he? I asked. Adam, you've already consulted realtors. You've talked about the house's value. You've suggested assisted living facilities to me repeatedly since the memorial. How is that a misunderstanding? Grace tugged at Adam's sleeve. Perhaps we should discuss this privately, she hissed. There's nothing to discuss, I said. The house is mine. It will remain mine. You're welcome to contest the will, but it will only waste your money and drag our family's private business through public courts. Adam stared at me as if seeing me for the first time. Perhaps he was. For years I'd been the accommodating mother, the one who smoothed things over, who never confronted him about his selfish behavior. Paul had been the boundary setter. Without him, Adam had assumed I would be easy to manipulate. Dad always favored you, he said bitterly. He never thought I was good enough. The accusation stung, but I recognized it for what it was, a desperate attempt to deflect and manipulate. Your father loved you, Adam, But love doesn't mean allowing someone to take advantage of others. I've never taken advantage. Stop. I held up my hand. I heard you in church at Paul's memorial service. Now she'll go and the house is ours. Those were your exact words. Adam's face went slack with shock. I hadn't told him I'd overheard that particular betrayal. You were talking about me like I was an inconvenience to be removed, while we were supposed to be honoring your father's memory. My voice cracked slightly, but I pressed on. Do you have any idea how that felt? Grace, ever the strategist, attempted damage control. Amelia, emotions were running high that day. Things were said that weren't meant. Enough, I said. I'm not interested in excuses. Mr. Steinman, is there anything else we need to address today? The lawyer shuffled his papers. There are some minor bequests. Paul's fishing equipment to his brother Michael, his tools to the community college workshop program, and a small trust for your grandchildren's education. Everything else goes to you, Mrs. Warner. I nodded and stood gathering my purse. Then I believe we're done here. Mom, Adam's voice had lost its edge, now tinged with panic. You can't just walk away, we need to talk about this. No, Adam, we don't. Not today. I turned to Mr. Steinman. Thank you for your time. As I walked out of the office, I heard Adam, behind me. This isn't over. She can't manage that house alone. She'll change her mind eventually. I smiled to myself as the elevator doors closed behind me. He still didn't understand what had changed. I wasn't the same woman who had entered that church a week ago. Something had awakened in me, a strength I'd forgotten I possessed. Paul had seen it all along. He'd known exactly what I would need to face this moment. As I drove home, my home, I felt lighter than I had in months. The battle wasn't over, but the first victory was mine. 3 months after the will reading, I stood in my garden, pruning Paul's roses in the warm spring sunshine. The house behind me wasn't just a structure of wood and brick. It was the physical embodiment of our life together, and now, increasingly, a symbol of my independence. The doorbell rang, interrupting my thoughts. When I opened the door, Adam stood on the porch, his expression uncertain. This wasn't the entitled son who had stormed out of the lawyer's office, but someone more subdued. Mom, he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. Can we talk? I hesitated, then stepped aside to let him in. Where's Grace? Not here. He glanced around the living room, noting the changes I'd made. Paul's favorite chair now had my reading materials beside it, and the walls had been repainted, in the soft yellow I'd always wanted, but Paul had resisted. You've made some changes, he observed. I have. I gestured for him to sit. What did you want to talk about? Adam perched on the edge of the sofa, looking uncomfortable. I've been doing some thinking about everything that happened, about what Dad wrote in his letter. I waited, giving him space to continue. He wasn't wrong, Adam finally admitted, the words seeming to cost him. Grace and I, we did have plans for this house. We've been struggling financially. The real estate market is so hot right now, and this property, he trailed off, looking ashamed, would have solved all your problems. I finished for him. He nodded. I convinced myself it was about taking care of you, that you'd be better off, somewhere smaller. But that wasn't the whole truth. No, it wasn't. I kept my voice gentle but firm. Grace and I have separated, he said abruptly. She was furious after the will reading, said I should contest it, that we deserved this house. But the more I thought about Dad's words, the more I realized. He paused, swallowing hard. I didn't like the person I was becoming. I studied my son's face, the face I'd loved since the moment I first held him. Despite everything, he was still my child. I'm sorry about your marriage, Adam. Don't be. It's been coming for a while. He looked around the room again. I've been so focused on what this house could give me that I forgot what it already gave me. A childhood, a home, memories with Dad that I can't get back. A lump formed in my throat. Your father loved you very much, Adam. He was just disappointed in some of your choices. I know that now. Adam's eyes glistened with unshed tears. I miss him, Mom, and I'm so sorry for how I've treated you. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, but I'm hoping maybe we can start over, somehow. I'd spent weeks cycling through anger, hurt, and disappointment. I'd mourned not just for Paul, but for the relationship with my son I thought I'd lost. Now, faced with his genuine remorse, I felt something I hadn't expected. Hope. I'd like that, I said softly. But things will be different, Adam. I'm different now. He nodded. I can see that. It looks good on you. We talked for 2 hours that day, really talked, in a way we hadn't in years. About Paul, about the house, about Adam's failing marriage and financial struggles. He didn't ask for money, and I didn't offer. That boundary remained clear. But by the time he left, something had shifted between us. Not forgiveness, exactly, but a path toward it. The following weekend, Adam returned with work gloves and toolbox, offering to help with the repairs Paul had left unfinished. We worked side by side on the back porch steps, and though our conversation was mostly practical, the silent companionship felt like the beginning of healing. Summer arrived, bringing with it an unexpected opportunity. Dorothy's daughter, a travel agent, mentioned a senior tour group heading to Italy in September. You should go, Dorothy insisted over our weekly coffee. Paul always talked about taking you to Venice. I can't just leave, I protested. The house will still be here when you get back, Dorothy cut me off. Besides, Adam's been helping with the maintenance, hasn't he? Let him look after things while you're gone. The idea took root and blossomed. 2 weeks in Italy, the trip. Paul and I had always planned for someday, a someday that never came. I booked the tour, feeling both terrified and exhilarated. Adam's reaction surprised me. You should absolutely go, Mom. Dad would have wanted you to. Are you sure you don't mind checking on the house? I'd be honored. He hesitated, then added, Actually, I've been meaning to talk to you about something. I found an apartment nearby, just 10 minutes from here. I thought it might be nice to be closer, to help out more. I studied his face, searching for hidden motives, but found only sincerity. Something in me softened further. I'd like that. The night before my departure for Italy, I sat on the porch swing, a small box in my lap containing some of Paul's ashes. I'd decided to take a portion with me, to leave in Venice as we had always planned. I'm taking you with me after all, I whispered to the box. Just not in the way we imagined. Adam arrived early the next morning to drive me to the airport. As we pulled away from the house, I felt a momentary pang of anxiety. It'll be fine, Mom, Adam reassured me, correctly reading my expression. I'll take good care of everything until you're back. At the airport, he helped with my luggage, then surprised me with a guidebook of Italy. I found this in Dad's desk, he explained. He must have been planning your trip already. There are some places marked. I clutched the book to my chest, deeply moved. Thank you for finding this. Have an amazing time, Mom. Take lots of pictures. He hugged me, a real hug, not the perfunctory embraces of recent years. I love you. I love you too, I replied, meaning it despite our complicated history. 2 weeks later, I stood on the Rialto Bridge in Venice, the city of water and light spread before me like a dream. In my hand, I held the small container of Paul's ashes. The tour group had moved ahead, giving me this private moment. We made it, Paul, I whispered. Just like we always said we would. I opened the container and let a small portion of the ashes drift into the Grand Canal, watching as they were carried away by the currents of one of the most beautiful cities in the world. In that moment, surrounded by the beauty we had always dreamed of seeing together, I felt Paul's presence more strongly than I had since his passing, not as a ghost or spirit, but as the part of him that would always live within me, in my memories, my strength, and the love we had shared for 50 years. I returned home renewed, with hundreds of photographs and a heart full of experiences to sustain me through the coming years. The house welcomed me back, solid and unchanging, yet somehow different, just as I was different. Adam had kept his word. The house was immaculate, the garden tended, even Paul's roses thriving under his care. He'd fixed the loose banister on the stairs and repainted the garage door, things Paul had planned to do before he became ill. "Welcome home, Mom," he said, helping me with my luggage. "How was Italy?" "Everything we dreamed it would be," I replied, stepping back into my house, my home, with a newfound peace. Let me tell you all about it. That evening, as twilight settled over the neighborhood, I sat on the porch swing, listening to the familiar creaks and watching fireflies dance in the garden. The house around me held 50 years of memories, some joyful, some painful, all precious. Paul had known what he was doing when he left me this house. It wasn't just about the property or its value. It was about preserving the life we had built together while giving me the space to create something new from it. I was 72, a widow, but my story wasn't over. It was simply turning to a new chapter, one that I would write for myself, with the strength Paul had always seen in me, even when I couldn't see it myself.